We are recording.
Okay, can I have everybody's attention? Hello? Okay. The meeting's up here. So we would like to have your attention. Thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna go, Jennifer, is gonna be a few minutes late. We're gonna go ahead and open the meeting. Can everybody hear back there? We've got a little teeny microphone. We're trying to approve what we have. And for anybody who cares to speak this evening, we do have a microphone and a podium set up over here so that you can step up to it and do that so everybody in the room can hear. Good. Okay. The monthly meeting of the Board of the San Carlos Estates Water Control District is called to order at 6 p.m. on 2023. Quorum is present. Well, Jennifer will be here, but at the moment, the quorum is present. Okay. Not used to not having somebody here. We've all been here for the past year. Roll call, Jim Bradford. Jennifer Fernanzo will be here in a few minutes. Supervisor John Salucci. Secretary Treasurer Chris Lawson. Attorney Richard Pringle. Engineer Ron Edenfield. And we have, anybody got a number on how many?
I have
people we have
14.
here?
I have 14, but someone.
more coming in.
Yeah, 15 now.
We have 15 landowners and guests here this evening. Thank you for everybody who has come this evening. The agenda has been distributed. All the board members have it in their packets. Okay. Mr. Edenfield.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to start? One last thing before we get started. We're going to have a fairly full agenda this evening, so we are going to limit 3 minutes to anybody who cares to speak. If it's not on the agenda, we may or may not listen to it this evening. Okay? Thank you very much. Mr. Edenfield.
Thank you, sir.
And here's your microphone.
Handy little pass around back. For the record, we've currently have 13 open permits under review, various stages. In addition to that, probably another half dozen that are in the compliance mode. We've received 3 new permits in the last period. We have finalized 3 permits. And we also have another 3 that are deemed substantial complete that we won't issue the final until the building and construction is completed. At which point we'll go back out and make sure that the right of way and everything is in good shape before we allow the CO of the structure. Additionally, during the period we've conducted 32 inspections. Of course, obviously many of those are duplicates where we're following up on issues, and resolved 2 compliance issues during the period. On other items, I found an interesting thing where a culvert is plugged with, appears to be either rocks.
About concrete bags.
Concrete bags, yes, that would be it. I noticed it several weeks ago, but I was wondering if Tony's guys might be able to pull those out.
I think our former engineer had that installed. For some reason, it's got a 3-inch pipe in the middle of it.
Oh,
So it's your call on that. You want it out of
with
there?
that, with that background, let me look into that.
I'm only assuming that it could have been a homeowner in some earlier years that did that. I happened to find it myself a couple of years ago.
Well, I will review that with Morris Depew. Speaking of them, I spoke with Mark Howell this afternoon. He's the engineer that's working on the MS4 report.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be filing that tomorrow. He was waiting on our comments, which we gave back to him today. So that will be going forward.
You said that was Mark that was working on that?
Mark's working on that.
Okay.
I will distribute out a copy of the filed report to everyone, and then we can have some discussion over it.
Okay.
Also, we've begun the inspections of the roadways and the failures that we've experienced. We're only partially through with that, so we haven't got that completed yet.
That's for FEMA, correct?
That's with the FEMA.
Okay.
And that's about all I've got, unless there's some questions. Trying to be brief since I know the council's gonna need some time.
Well, at the moment, I think we're good, so why don't we go ahead and move along. Okay, it's my turn to talk, and he didn't tell you everything that we have to talk about, so I guess I get to say something anyway. So anyway, our FEMA meetings have been continuing, and one of the newest things that's happened during the FEMA meetings is the FEMA has now extended our time frame for the cleaning of our canals and ditches and things out. So as that has now been extended out several months, I just need to make sure the board is aware of that. We had got a declaration meeting right after the hurricane, whereas the board has authorized the chair to sign into contracts and things relating to FEMA only. So as we need to move forward with these things, we're still under time frames that we cannot extend out the meetings, or we won't meet the time requests for completing that work. So right now, do you remember how many months we've got on that, Mr. Edenfield?
That,
3 months?
I believe it's 3 months.
We've got about 3 months from the last meeting to complete the next phase of the work that we need to complete. And because the first phase was on such a time constraint and the canals around the outside perimeters of the road were still full of water, we had no way to see the bottom. It didn't matter who you hired to do the work. It was limited to what we could see, get out, and find at the time. Now that the water's going away and FEMA has extended the timeout, we'll be able to go back and use whatever means necessary to finish cleaning up the projects and the work that's at hand to get done. Let's see. We will be bidding those projects if there's any question about that whatsoever.
And they are working on scheduling the site inspections for the FEMA site inspectors.
Yes, we have site inspections from FEMA that are going to be conducted. That takes a lot of the work out of it, and the engineer will be able to go by what they say after that. Otherwise, we have to go by what the engineer takes, and it's going to take a lot more time and a lot more work.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
You may.
just to clarify something that you said earlier, my recollection is that when we had that emergency meeting of the board, you were authorized to take action and to enter into agreements to complete repair and restoration of the district's works, of the canals, the roadways, any of the district's works.
Any and all.
Yes, sir. So before you mentioned related to FEMA matters, but it's actually broader. The authority was broader than that. It was to, even if FEMA will not reimburse the district for an item, the board authorized you to get the work done to protect, to repair, and restore the district's improvements in the district's right-of-ways.
That's correct, and the term FEMA was probably incorrect to be said. It was Irma or Ian's related
Yes, sir.
damages to
That's right.
to our community.
And I said Irma, didn't I? I apologize. We're all over the place, but not in the right place.
As long as we get to the end zone and the end line.
That's right. We have meeting minute somewhere that confirms it was related to Ian, and it was all repair and restoration work that was required.
That is correct.
Yes, sir. And that's not been revoked. That is still in effect.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, at what point do we want to,
Treasurer report.
we've got the Secretary Treasurer's next. At what point would we like to have, oh, you want my microphone? I don't like to use it.
I can speak loud.
No, you're going to include the Tuscan report in yours, or are we going to wait?
Oh, no,
That's
that's
actually
the
under
business.
your business agenda because you have to take action to approve it at the end of the presentation. Yes, sir. So it's an action item.
So we'll keep everything short. Can you hear me? Everybody can hear me? All right. So again, as we have in months past, going straight to the variance report because that has all the information that we need to report on. The board members do have a copy of the balance sheet as it currently sits, a copy of the check detail, a copy of the expenses and income for the month, as well as the comparison from last year. But when looking at the variances, we like to see how we are doing in comparison to the budget. And so for right now, we have received $12,422 in bank interest, which is 99% over what we estimated. And that's, again, largely due to the Fed Reserve actions. So we are now getting over 4% in our Florida Prime account, and that is why that number is so much greater than what we expected. Not a bad thing. The CIP tax revenues received year-to-date so far are at $493,679. We are 88% funded for that. Our general maintenance tax revenue is $524,168 received, and we are 88% there. So on the CIP, we still have to collect $68,646, and on the general maintenance, we have to collect $71,484. As everybody knows, the tax collector's office did do some extensions on the tax payments. I don't know if the March 31st date was extended or not before they start doing certificates. But I think if you filed an application saying that your house was severely impacted by Ian, you have until May, I believe is the last word I had read on that. So we may see some later revenues coming in into the summer months than we have in the past. Other income, we have $21,630, which is 9% below plan, and that's largely due to gate remotes. And that is the only other item of note is our use and connection permit fee. We estimated in our budget that we would receive $9,000. We should have received by now, this time of year on an annualized basis, $3,050. So we're down about 32%. So what that means, and I did get 3 permit fees today, so that will improve the condition for the month of March. But that just means we have less starts than we did in prior years, and so we overestimated what we would receive year to date. In expenses, we have expended $648,992. Of that, the only items of note are bank fees, which is $757, and that's 41% over the year annualized. We had to get $285 we spent on check copies for FEMA, so that caused the bank fees to kind of take a jump this month. The other items of note that are outside the range, on drainage, we had projected in our budget $134,800. We've only spent $3,035. That is non-Ian related. So we are $64,365 under budget, and that's because there are anticipated projects that we have yet to begin because of the Hurricane Ian damage. Engineering costs, we are at $44,341. That's right on target. Our gate is severely less than what was anticipated. We planned $2,000. We've spent $170. And that's largely due to the fact that we replaced the gate so that we didn't have the repairs that would be otherwise needed as a result of Hurricane Ian. Our insurance is fine. Legal expenses under budget. We've only spent $7,281. We had budgeted $44,000. So we're under budget $14,720, which is about 67% annualized. But I have not received recent billings from Mr. Pringle's office for probably 3 months now. Yeah, I think so. He doesn't like to get paid. And then for miscellaneous expenses, we're right on target at 3%. The only other item that we have that is really out of whack are the roads. We had budgeted $55,000 for road work. We've only spent $400 from the general maintenance for road work, which is $27,100 under budget. And again, last year, if you recall at the annual meeting, we had anticipated some big road projects. We had $25,000 for road repairs that we were going to do. We had $6,000 for road signage. Hurricane Ian took the monies that we've already spent. That's falling under the Hurricane Ian category. So we are not taking that out of general maintenance. And we have not done any of the road projects that we had originally anticipated because of our emphasis and focus on the Hurricane Ian damage year to date. Swale mowing is right on track. So just to give you an idea of how much the district has currently spent for Hurricane Ian damage, we had brought over $200,000 from our Florida Prime account to pay damages, anticipated damages. Year to date, so far, we've spent $188,000, $419,000 of that $200,000. So we have $11,581 left of that initial expectation. I think once we get some of Mr. Pringle's bills, that will be readily used up. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. That concludes my report.
Give me back my money. No, just with,
Oh, it goes to Richard.
it's gonna be him next, you might as well give it to him. You are keeping separate, and it sounds like you are, but just everything to do with Hurricane Ian is subjective to us getting reimbursed for. So therefore, we need to make sure that whether it's the attorney's bills, whether it's the engineer's bills, whoever we're contracting work for, we have to make sure that we have that separated. It's not something we want to go find later.
No, we have, I created additional line items on the QuickBooks for Hurricane Ian costs. And so whenever we receive a bill that references Hurricane Ian, it goes into that. And if you look on your report here, you can see both line items.
Okay. I do try to watch those myself just to make sure one doesn't slide by. I know what column I want in. So, Mr. Pringle.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you have a full agenda this evening with the audit presentation. So I'll keep my comments very short and say I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. I continue to work on items for the district. That's short enough.
That's a record. I don't know, we tried last time, but then you started talking about something else.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll give up the mic quickly before I change my mind.
Chris, check the invoice, it's not per letter tonight.
Okay.
Scott, sorry?
So sure it's not per letter tonight.
Oh, yeah.
No bill for
I just signed it.
So the next line item,
Sorry, following the test. What is it? Following the test.
I think Jim would sign by.
Okay, we'll just have to
I don't know
have
what it
Mr.
is.
Edgefield clarify
Okay.
that, okay? So, okay.
The next line item is amendments to the meeting agenda. We are looking at a different, just for everybody's edification, we are looking at a new agenda that came straight out of our brand new policy and procedures manual, so that is throwing Mr. Jim off a little bit.
Okay, any amendments to the meeting's agenda? No,
No, sir. I don't have any.
okay. Public input and business, on,
Those are business agenda items,
right.
Yes.
A through K.
Okay,
So that you're asking for public input now.
Yes, sir. So just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, under this new format, this part of the public input is related to the business agenda items only. The idea is to keep the focus on all the business agenda items, the decision-making items to come before the board, so that you can get through the primary purpose of this meeting, which is to carry out and make decisions that only you can make on behalf of the district. So this is public input on the business agenda items A through L,
Okay.
Okay,
A through K.
do we
Okay.
start and go down the list one at a time? Or
No,
are we asking
sir,
for
you would-
public input
yes,
on
sir, you
any
just
or
call-
all of
right.
them at this time?
Right, you would call for public input on any business agenda items, yes, sir.
Okay, public input on any of the business items at hand that we're gonna be covering.
And the business agenda was on the website.
The amended agenda was on the website.
Okay, and so anyone who wanted to see the business agenda material could see that on the website. And we're gonna get better and better with that every month. But it is up tonight, and so there was an opportunity to see it in advance of tonight's meeting.
Okay, then apparently no public input at this time. We're going to continue on with the meeting. Hey, minutes approval?
Yeah, we're,
We need approval.
Yes, sir.
Okay. A motion for approval of
John?
the meeting minutes.
You want a second, Brett?
Second motion.
Aye, all three.
Aye.
Financial report?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just one more clarification. So the other part of what we're trying to do with the business agenda items listed here in this section, we're going to try to, unless we say otherwise, and sometimes we may, but unless we say otherwise, the general rule will be each one of these items requires board action that's listed. So each one of these, you would entertain a motion on each one of these, just trying to create a pattern, a
okay.
formula for you to get through.
We'll
So,
try to follow that.
yes, sir. That's
Sorry about that, it got changed and.
yes, sir. I changed everything around on you. I'm sorry.
Okay, we need a motion on A, meeting minutes approval of 2/20/23.
we did that.
We did that one.
Okay,
Now
I
you're on
didn't
B.
specifically say it like that. I thought the attorney
That's right. Yes,
was
sir. Yes,
asking
sir.
me to repeat it.
Okay.
You're doing correct. Yes, sir. That's right.
Jennifer,
And I approve the meeting minutes for approval.
John,
I approve, yes.
aye,
Aye.
okay.
Aye. Now, 9B, right?
Yes, sir.
Not 9B.
9B.
A motion to approve the financial report approval for 2/28/23 and 3/31/23 as of 3/20/23.
I approve the financial report approval.
I second the motion.
Aye, motion carries.
Okay, and we also want to be approving the bank statements at the same time that we're doing this. It wasn't part of the agenda, so we need to add that to the agenda.
Yes, ma'am. You do. That you also need to approve the bank statements.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
motion to approve the bank statements of the same period of time.
Right.
Second the motion. Yeah. Or motion.
Aye, motion carries.
So Supervisor Salucci made that motion
He
at
did.
that time? Okay. And Supervisor Finazzo seconded the
I'll
motion?
second it.
Okay.
Are we approving 9C or waiting for them to make their presentation, then approving 9C?
Let them they need to make their presentation, and then you will ask any questions that you have of the auditor related to the audit and the presentation of the audit. And then ultimately at the end, you will need to take action to approve the audit as presented.
So should we go to D, E, and work all those and then
I-
assume audit presentation will take the most time?
Yes, sir. That's up to the pleasure of the board.
Cover this, go ahead, how would you like to do it? I don't care.
I recommend we do D through K unless we have any issues and then allow more time, because I'm sure, I know I have questions, so.
Okay, can we read D through K and then put a motion on the floor to accept all of those, or do we have to do them independently?
I think some of those need to be dealt with independently, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Some of them may be able to be disposed of quickly, but like setting the annual meeting date may take a little bit of discussion. The manager's position, the secretary treasurer's position, there may be a little bit of discussion on those. I would take them one at a time.
okay.
Do you all, Ms. Lisa, and Mr. Tuscan, do you have time to be put down at the? Okay.
A motion to approve contracts on the canal and perimeter road cleaning, roadway trimming, culvert cleaning. This was, which contracts are you referring to? Because this was done
Yes, sir.
during the
So this is still an open item, Mr. Chairman, if I may, briefly discuss for you. This is still an open item. There are requests for proposals that have been worked on. The engineer, Mr. Edenfield, has been working on scopes of work related to these contracts. Those scopes of work may be affected in part by the work that is being done for the repair and restoration of the district's canals and roadways as a result of the
Some of it will be, that was the question.
Hurricane Ian impact. So that this item is actually going to need to be continued because we are still working on completion of the request for proposals and the modified scope of work, especially for this year, that's related to the action that's going to be done through the Hurricane Ian repair and restoration work. So this one, if you could move.
D&E, I would recommend a motion to move and continue.
Yes, sir. At least on D, and I don't know if you need to have any further discussion on E before you move to continue it as well. The chair's already made his presentation of the activity that he's been doing and has indicated that the FEMA, that there's been an extension of the FEMA time period to file your claim.
For the actual cleanup.
Yes, sir.
So we have more time to go back and do things that we missed to begin with.
So I'm not aware of any other action unless the chairman has other action that's required under item E either on Hurricane Ian. Was there any other presentation, Mr. Chairman, on that you need to do? Otherwise, you can continue both of those items to the next board meeting.
Okay, I just don't want to see E confused with what we approved or reapproved or affirmed earlier
Yes.
in the meeting.
No, it's not. That action is not being affected by this.
Then
This-
we'll put off both these items.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to continue 9D and 9E. 9D contracts, canal perimeter road cleaning, roadway trimming, culvert cleaning, and 9E Hurricane Ian damages issued resolution repairs, FEMA, payment for repairs.
Sir.
Aye.
Second?
Second.
Aye. All approved.
And
So-
is that for the April meeting or do you
Yes,
want to?
no.
That'll be for the
We'll
April
just
meeting.
roll it to the next meeting.
F, manager job description selection, Mr. Primer.
Well, Mr. Pringle, if I, with all due respect, would like to request a special meeting with respect to the other two board members in this time period of this week, after identifying and meeting with Ms. Chris and Audrey, and present to the other two board members for us to be able to make a qualified and quantified decision on moving forward with the new managerial position based on the statutes 298.19, 298.17, and 298.14.
Mr. Chairman, if you want me to,
I'd like you to comment on that, please.
sure. A special meeting would be appropriate. That's a good idea, actually. The district has not had a manager's position or a superintendent's position in the past. One of the statutes that Supervisor Finazzo referred to is the subsection in Chapter 298 that deals with the superintendent's work, and I think that is part of the job description that you are trying to create in item 9F, where you're referring to the manager's position. So having a special meeting dedicated just to the discussion of that job description, which is new for you, and also how that job description interrelates with the treasurer's job description and with the secretary of the board and secretary of the district's job description. All three of those interrelate. Yes, that would be a good topic for a special meeting to figure out who's going to do what, how the relationships are going to be not only with each other, but also with the board primarily, and also with the engineer and with legal counsel, how those relationships are all going to work together on a monthly basis, what the expectations are of those positions. I think that's all very worthy of a special meeting.
Yeah, we had a lengthy, extensive meeting between the three of us and came to a pretty good formulation, but I'd like to, share that or be able to have that communication with the other two board members.
I think that would be a good topic for a special meeting, and that would be the topic for the special meeting, Mr. Chairman. So you can have a single subject special meeting. We can put a notice in the paper. You can hold it whenever.
What's the earliest possible date we can set that?
It needs
10
to
days,
be.
isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes, sir. To get it into the news press, and the news press moves around on us, but typically it's at a minimum of 10 days. That's if I can sweet talk the news press into putting the ad in quickly. The minimum notice requirement, the ad needs to be in the newspaper 7 days before the actual meeting date. So I tack on 3 days to try to convince the news press that they really can get a notice in the legal ads that quickly.
The news press takes that long to get an ad in these days.
Yes, sir. The news press's standard today is 7 days in advance of the meeting notice going in the legal ads section. So that would be 2 weeks, 2 full weeks, which before you hold your meeting is when I have to send it to the news press. That's what they want. And I'll try to get it shorter than that. But the goal is to get the meeting set on a date when everybody can be present. And would you want it here, I guess?
April 3rd?
That's 2 weeks out from today.
That might work.
When did you say?
April 3rd.
Okay. Whatever works for you guys, I'll be there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on Monday. You can always
Do you
put
have
a
a
TikTok, it'll be out in 7
And it
minutes.
doesn't have to be in the evening. That's right.
Do you have a conflict with another meeting?
I might. I'll, Mr. Chairman, if I can also check my schedule to make sure that. that
Are mornings better
That's
for
what
you?
I won't check.
Are mornings better?
Anytime works for me.
Monday the 3rd, I can make the day work,
Okay.
if you want.
Monday the 3rd, 10
Okay.
a.m. if possible.
Yeah.
We'll
Let's
use
lock
that
it in
as,
soon, so
as
we
the-
know, 'cause then I have to
I'll-
work my schedule.
Yeah,
Yes,
I can
sir.
call in.
so that's the absolute preferred date, and we'll see if we can make that work.
Monday the 3rd.
Can you make that?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
candidate, can you make it?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Candidate. Does the 3rd work for you?
You tell me and I'll be there.
Okay, thank you.
I might be able to work to make it so I work from home that day.
Either or. Or we can do it later.
And somebody at some point will need to tell me a location, and that would be to discuss
You'll be here.
the.
I'll make the arrangements.
Okay.
If that changes, I'll notify everybody by tomorrow.
Okay.
And I can go ahead and put it on the calendar, right?
I'll get you the notice to put up. Yes, ma'am. And that would be to discuss both positions, job descriptions, and selection. Okay. Okay. All right.
Based on what we formulated and came up with.
So we need motions.
Yes. Put a motion on the floor that we, go ahead, you put the motion on the floor. It's your motion.
Motion on the floor to have a special meeting on April 3rd, 10 a.m. regarding the manager, secretarial, and treasurer positions.
I second the motion.
Aye.
All in favor, aye. Mr. Pringle, I would also suggest that we inform Mr. Edensfield in case we need to have engineering for a phone call to have questions about scope and duties and abilities of the potential manager. Because a lot of this is going to be
Interaction.
pre-engineering work here, not just administrative work.
That's right.
Okay.
And
I don't think you have to be at the meeting, but we have a phone call you in,
We'll be available either in person or by phone.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Annual meeting, set date and time for the annual meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, the statute that you operate under, Chapter 298, requires you to hold an annual landowners meeting. At that landowners meeting, several activities need to occur. First, there will be an election of a supervisor. Who's up this year? I don't know.
I am.
Jim is.
Okay. Supervisor Bradford is up for Supervisor Bradford Seed is up for election this year for a 3-year term. So that's one item that occurs. The other primary item that occurs is the engineer makes his, or someone on behalf of the district, normally it's the engineer, makes a presentation of the work that has been performed on behalf of the district this past year. That also oftentimes includes some description of the work that is anticipated to be done in the upcoming year as well. So those are the two broad topics to be discussed at the annual meeting. Normally, Mr. Chairman, at least normally being defined as the last 2 years, we have put out an annual landowners meeting letter
And we will do that for
to
sure.
all the landowners. It is an opportunity if you desire to discuss specific topics in that landowners meeting. It's almost always in the annual landowners meeting letter, I make sure to include reference to the limited power of a proxy, power of attorney that a landowner can give to someone else to vote in their favor and how that works. Also, other topics that we've discussed in the past relate to the manual for driveway permitting and things like that. And we've had some discussion, just general discussion about some of the rules of the district in past letters. So I can structure that. The law says, Chapter 298.11 says that you have to hold your first meeting within a certain time period of being created. You were judicially created many years ago. And so you were supposed to hold your first annual meeting within a certain time period, 20 days plus 30, I think, is the window. The best we can determine, I wasn't there then. Neither was Miss Chris. And the best we can determine is that meeting occurred, that first annual landowners meeting occurred in the month of September. It would appear that would appear to be the case. If you're supposed to have the meeting essentially every year at the same time, that's the idea of the law, is to hold the meetings every year at the same time.
Meaning the month.
The month, yes, or not the date in particular, but the month. I have had occasions where boards have, for emergency reasons, or hurricanes do occur in the month. In your case, in the month of September. So there have been occasions where meetings have had to be moved, but that's what the law says, is that you're going to hold it in the same month that you had the first annual meeting. And the best we can determine, that appears like that was in September. So based upon that, your annual landowners meeting would occur in September. Also in September, is when we set, right, the rates for, is that in September or is that in August? That you set the rates for
August.
the next year. So that will happen in August. And I can look, if you want to try to have the meeting in August, I can look to see if we have any flexibility to that statute that I earlier described, and if we can back it up a little bit into mid-August or something, I can look to see if we can do
For
that.
me, I was planning a vacation this year for the last part of August, the first few weeks in September. So either if we can roll it back into August or late September.
Either early August or late September, one of the two.
would be my preference as far as I'm concerned.
For me,
Our
before September
fiscal
28th.
year, calendar year is October, September, correct?
Yes, sir. September 30 is the end. October 1 is the beginning of the fiscal
So as
year.
long as we have the annual meeting prior to the new fiscal year starting October 1st, does it really matter?
It matters in that we need to land pretty close to when your first annual meeting occurred way back in 1969 or whenever that was, and as best we can tell, it would be.
Why are you trying to change it?
No, nope.
No.
Nobody's trying to change
Right
it.
at the same
I just trying to
time
come
frame.
up with a date.
We do
Is it September
this,
16th? Is it
we do
September
this every year.
You're correct.
So we have some time, Mr. Chairman. I'll put together a letter. We'll talk, Ms. Lawson and I will talk about dates and see if we can get a date set tentatively. that works on everyone's calendar, and then the board can either, I mean, you can take this up in April, and we can come back to you with a report on a date, a tentative date, and maybe a tentative letter contents for the letter to the landowners, and then you can make your final decision then if you want to. And we'll try to stay away from that time period that you're going to be out of town, if that's what you want to do.
I mean, I'm only asking on my behalf. It's the board can do anything they really want to do.
Sure. Well,
9/28. I'm unable to attend to
So-
the end of the
Didn't
year.
last year you had it on Saturday?
Yeah, it was
We
Saturday.
try to hold it on Saturdays for the
Yeah.
convenience of the landowners.
Yeah, well, you got the 23rd and 30th, those last 2 weekends in of September. That still gives you the first 2 weeks of the month of September. Still 2 weeks after that, 23rd and 30th.
But when are you planning to come back? Do you know?
You get the dates. When are we going to plan on being back?
Around 16th.
Oh,
That's
so the
Saturday the 16th, so then if we do the following week.
23rd would be fine.
23rd, sounds like
That'd be fun.
Are you good for the 23rd?
I'll have to find out, but it's a possibility. That's one of my board meeting weeks, so I should be okay.
23rd?
Okay.
Here?
We'll tentatively
Yeah,
set that.
tentatively.
We'll go through and talk about it and see if there are any problems. The engineer, Mr. Edenfield, will need to be here. I assume normally with water control districts, it is the engineer who makes the description, the presentation of the works of the district for the past year and the anticipated works for the coming year. So he's important to be present as
And I have
well.
the treasurer's report, annual treasurer's
Yes,
report.
ma'am. And the treasurer's report is also. So the whole cast will need to be present for that special meeting.
Okay.
So Saturday, September the 23rd is kind of sort of a tentative, maybe possible date. That's lawyer talk for.
And we did it last year
It's
around
not
10
set
a.m.
Kind of, sort of.
10 a.m.
That's fine.
And I'll check with the office here to make sure that the room's available.
Okay. If it's not, I'll make arrangements for a different location.
Okay.
At 10 a.m. Since it is tentative, we'll bring it back to the board. So at your April board meeting,
We'll vote on it.
yes, sir, we can vote on it then. So if you want to continue this item, Mr. Chairman, entertain a motion to continue this item, then it'll show up on your next board meeting.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to continue the annual meeting, setting of the date and the time until the next meeting.
A second.
I agree.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, John Salucci, website streamline hosting platform.
Yeah, I didn't bring my notes, but basically,
One's cooler than the other.
Chris, do you have my notes from when I sent
You have it
Is it
all
in
in
the
your packet. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so there's an entity that could host our website, and they focus specifically on government entities hosting websites. They're out of California. They have about 1,100 special government entities, including water districts, which I thought was interesting. So they're used to hosting websites, and they're capable of making sure the website, its structure, its language, the format, the way it's presenting, meets government regulations, because you are a government entity, us, and then how we present information meets the standards and regulations for websites, including ADA and a few others. They said it would take about 2 to 4 weeks to migrate the site over. According to them, if I understood correctly, it was $250. That was it.
For the
That included-
migration.
Yeah, and that included tech support and everything. And while they're doing that, we want to add photos. We want to make the site more informative, the structure, how we present it to the landowners here and anybody in the public. We could do that, and they'll put that in there, all part of the same $250 fee. So we get to sort of repackage the form of our website as well as some of the substance. So from what I thought, talking to people, wasn't a bad idea. And I don't know if we need to make a motion, just say, yes, we agree to that, or we're gonna do more research. I don't know what more research I can do,
There's a maintenance fee for the hosting, and John, you said something that there was an additional small fee for email server
but.
hosting.
We could actually, it's a flat fee, 180, the web hosting, and then there was a small fee if we wanna have a .org, a legitimate government email for board members. Not all of us are personally using our personal emails. Which I personally don't think is very professional for a government.
And the state of Florida would prefer that we have an .org email
So
or
I think
governmental
You
email.
should have.
Yeah, so I think we need to go that way.
You need
and
to
transition over, yes.
So it's $100, $180 a month. It's based on the annual revenue, and that's from $500,000 to $1 million. There's a $250 setup fee to get the website set up and created, and then migrated over.
So it's a couple $1,000s a year for the email and the hosting of the site. So my question is, what are we currently paying with this?
We're just right now we're paying $7.95 a month for email, one email, and then we pay nothing for the Google site. We have an annual Google storage fee of $19.99 for up to 100 gigs of storage, which is the Google Drive, and I'm assuming that part of the
Yeah,
website's
they
probably
said we
tied
had
that.
unlimited storage. I think
Yeah.
we had the ability to have cloud unlimited storage, which is also good for all our files.
Can you stream the meetings on that?
I never asked them, but we could. I don't know. Maybe it's a third-party service. What I personally don't like is that Google is having access to us and our information. How do we know what they're selling, not selling? Our personal emails get associated with the site. So who knows where that metadata is going?
It sometimes messes with your Apple stuff too. I had it kicked me out a couple times.
Yeah, because I have an Apple phone, but I have a PC, regular PC. I do see that on the phone sometimes.
This is the least expensive web hosting I've seen, kind of in my limited foray. And the fact that they do special districts, that they focus on small districts. They have a number of other water control districts in the state of Florida that they do. They're a member of the FSASD and in fact do their web host site. So that there were a number that they gave us to look at, and they're kind of all formatted the same, so it's easy to navigate. And when you have a board meeting, what you do is you put the minutes and the agenda in that date for the board meeting. So instead of searching here, there, and everywhere for the agenda or the minutes, you go to the date, and it's all, you populate everything right into that date. So it's a lot better organized.
But it's going to be organized going forward, or do we have to make some adjustments of our historical documents to get them into their system so it's easy then to sort them?
They did, you saw the mocked up version?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so they did that from our existing site. We're going to have to do some other things and come up with some other, we're going to have a project to work on getting the required documents, the regulatory documents into the site where they belong. So there'll be some work that we have to work with them in getting it, and then they'll migrate that over with wherever we do.
So is there any comments from general counsel to the board about approaching something like this to be, quote, really in compliance by having, what's your opinion about migrating over something like this?
I believe it is a good thing in that you have someone who is familiar with the statutory compliance requirements overseeing the placement of the content, of your content on your website. The statutory compliance requirement is an element that I would like to see addressed by a third party would be a good thing.
And they have some kind of mechanism where if there's something that we put up that's not compliant, it gets flagged immediately. And the other thing is that they are also adept with the ADA requirement for websites that really are more for visually impaired persons, having to do with text, fonts, and colors, and the like. So There's a lot of, they really thought through the product.
Well, then, I would make a motion that we consider adopting this, assuming we can get another project of some people from the community to help look at what we want to do to improve the content of the website. Because I personally am not going to do the whole thing by myself. Just like I did with looking at the gates with David, or whatever. So any people in the community would like to support that.
Yeah, we would like to see community participation in a lot. This is our community. And a lot of you people have started coming here over the past few years. We would like to see you participate in what we do. We basically are volunteers up here, and we'd like to have, you guys work on it and make this your community project. So anybody who would like to work with us on it, please jump right in with both feet.
And
Has
so, Mr. Chairman,
anyone spoken to the other water control districts to see how they're doing with this program?
With the websites,
Yeah.
I haven't talked directly to that. I've just visited their sites. And it seems to me that if it was not working to their favor, that they would no longer be continuing with it.
Well, they still might have problems that they like or don't like. And it would be good to be aware of those.
Okay, we can make some phone calls.
It wouldn't hurt to do that, but we also only have a few water control districts in the state of Florida,
Right.
which we're one of the smallest. So when we're looking at their websites, they've really got a lot more experience in doing this than this small district does.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The Florida Association of Special Districts is the statewide group association of special districts, not only water control districts, but independent fire districts and all kinds of different districts. There's a number of them. So for this organization to be affiliated and to be recommended or suggested by the Florida Association of Special Districts is a good thing in itself. I do know that a number of districts, unfortunately, try to do their own and have compliance problems. And so to have an independent contractor do the work so that compliance requirement is satisfied, I think is a very good benefit that you receive from this effort. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What I'd like to do is go ahead and put a motion on the floor to move forward with this website streamlining and hosting platform. I'd like to ask
I'll probably.
John Barton.
No, Ron just said, is our district a member of that Florida Association?
No, we are not.
Is there a fee, or is there?
Yeah,
Yes,
there's a fee.
Does it benefit the district for us to pay the fee and be associated with them? Because they may have resources to help us craft a better website.
If, Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you are looking at the crafting of the website issue only, I would say no, sir. I don't remember what the fee is. It's if what I do recall is it's a sliding scale. So the larger your revenue stream, the higher the fee is that you pay. They provide lobbying activities, generally speaking, for special districts, independent special districts like you. They do have some resources that they provide as well. I have a number of districts who are members of the Florida Association of Special Districts, and they do have opportunities for education to occur. That the fact that you can ask questions of them is also not a bad thing. I don't know what their fee would be for you, and that probably would be a question to ask and find out some details if there's an interest in possibly becoming a member to find that out. But yes, sir.
I can look into that.
Okay, then I make a motion that we continue the research of this, because it's even if we agree to it tonight, it's still going to be a month before they transition over anyway. So what's another few more weeks? Because this website's been up for years. So
Yeah, my
I think we need to do a little more research, find out about this association, what they can do. And I actually agree that we should try to call maybe South Water District and ask them, like ask Mr. Flood, and who hosts your website? How did you build that? And then you'll be able
Do
to
you
answer the
like it?
question.
Well, the motion was to actually have you chair it and look into all of these things.
Okay.
So
I thought you
that-
said you didn't want to.
that really would narrow down the discussion for tonight.
What's the motion?
The motion is to have Chairman Salucci be the chair of this program for the website streaming hosting platform and look into all aspects of it and come back with a recommendation of moving forward or not.
Okay. My suggestion, just as a suggestion, because we'll have our annual letter going out probably in late July, early August, that maybe we coordinate the establishment of the website in conjunction with the annual letter, so that way we get the word out to the residents that the website has changed.
Good.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And Audrey volunteered to be part of that
The what?
committee.
Are you volunteering too? Are you
I'm
volunteering?
just shaking my head that I agree.
Okay, motion, Pat. The motion was on the
We've got
floor.
John. John has made the motion. Second.
Sit in
Aye.
hands.
Motion carries.
Yeah, don't raise.
Okay. All right. We're sort of getting behind here a little bit, so we need to start moving forward there, bud.
All right.
Okay, DEP grant, we have multiple projects going on all the time, so when you mention grants to me, it goes back to the same thing about, there's a lot of people in our community that know a lot more about grants than the people sitting up here, and getting assistance and participation by people in the community would be very advantageous to the community itself. But every grant that has opportunities for us, we should look into.
Ron, did you look at the material that was sent out about the DEP grant?
I did review that. I wanted to talk to our FEMA coordinator, who also is our connection to the state of Florida, HMGP group and the mitigation dollars that the state of Florida offers, and we'll be meeting this week. And the question will be, are these two programs in conflict or competition, or are they both open and available to us?
Okay. This particular one has a 3/29 deadline to
Right.
apply, and you have to have a project that you are wanting to do in order to apply. So the time is short.
We have several projects that
Yeah.
working on through FEMA through our FEMA project manager. And that becomes the question: is this program, does that take us out of being able to go through the DEP's mitigation funds, or are they both available to us? And what we don't want to do is go for one and then get kicked out of the other.
Right.
So
So
we
you,
had that conversation. I believe the meeting is when, Jim? I didn't see
The next meeting, I believe, is Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Yes.
okay.
So we'll get an answer to that, and if indeed those they're not in conflict and they are both available to us, then we'll have a conversation about moving some of those projects over into this program.
And
Whether or not-
my understanding, Dale, from speaking with him in right relationship to this stuff, is we can apply for as many grant projects as we want. They're not in conflict with one another, so I don't think we're gonna be in problem with that.
Right.
I think that if they pay for something, then FEMA just is not gonna pay for it. But FEMA is not a bank account, except for the fact that if we do the work, we have an opportunity to get reimbursed for the work. And then sometimes the projects are on a percentage basis, not 100%. So anything, even if we were on a plan like this, it might turn out to be better than waiting on FEMA to repay us, because this will write us a check to do the work. So, okay, we will look into that in the next, and I don't believe that that would require,
I would think.
and if it does, does this require board action to
Well,
fill in for a grant?
I think that you probably need to give Ron the authority to redo the research and make the application, unless it falls under, Jim, your authority for the prior declaration.
What, Mr. Chairman, what I was thinking is you were discussing grant proceeds and applying for grants. My recollection is that the authority granted to you as the chairman of the board in that emergency meeting related to Hurricane Ian repair and restoration is that we gave, the board authorized you to apply for FEMA money, and I think that authorization, I remember specific reference to FEMA, but I think the reference was broad enough, the authority was broad enough to include applying for other grants as well, getting money from whatever source you could get money from, I think was part of the discussion.
Yeah.
So I think that authorization, so my point is, I think that authorization included authority to enter into contracts, to seek proceeds, grant proceeds, and to do any and all work that is related to repair and restoration from Hurricane Ian damage. If that is in fact the broad scope of that authority that was given to you, then I think the pursuit of this grant would also fall within that authority.
Are the other board members in compliance with that?
That's how I recall it as well.
Okay.
No, if there was anything related to Hurricane
Also,
Ian.
from a practical point of view, DEP is state of Florida. FEMA is federal.
Right.
I don't see how the feds can argue what the state of Florida wants to give to us, and vice versa.
Yeah, they'd already told us we could move forward.
I would move forward.
So I think that authorization was already granted in that emergency meeting.
Then let's, moving on then. Gate report,
So do I need
recommendations,
to say
John.
Yes.
Chris, is the report actually up on the website? People can see all the photos?
Or if it is, we can put it.
And it's not on the website for the photos.
Okay.
I can put it on the website for the photos,
Well,
if
people
you
want
like.
to know.
but there wasn't really any description really to say.
There was photographs and stuff taken. If we had that file, we could put it in over here and put them up on the
Just
screen.
minor comments. But yeah, I could put it.
It doesn't matter. So, Mike, Peel and I went around and for a few days and took photos of all of the perimeter roads and all the roads north and south and all the gates. Took measurements, everything. A lot of stuff was somewhat consistent. Some things weren't consistent. Some fixed barriers and some gates are right at the end of some road. Then there's Benita Bill to the left, Benita Bill to the right. Some of them seem to be on the property line between two properties on the perimeter, Benita Bill or Mariah. And what's interesting is some of the gates have a certain size, other gates are just ad hoc. Like over years, there's no rhyme or reason. And I just thought it'd be nice if we eventually come up with a standard approach. I would do all the gates. And some of the perimeter roads, and some of the roads, particularly north, like on, is it Rocky Road, Chris? What was the other one?
Rip Rocky and Emerald.
Yeah, I think. That there's no gates at all on the perimeter road. So either we have gates everywhere, or, we have, where are they? Are they on the property line to the district's property lines and private residence property lines? So there's no decisions tonight. I just did the research, trying to get the files updated so we have a reference point when this issue about gates come up in the future. We now kind of know what we have, what we don't have. And if we go forward with some more gates, let's make them all consistent. I got quotes for companies that do it. There's plenty of used guardrails out there that's not that expensive, installed and everything. It don't come and do them. They'll all be the same standard size. So it's just for information purposes for the district and for the community members, because we didn't have anything like that before. No one ever did it, including the previous engineering firm. So that's my report.
Thank you very much. They put a lot of work into that, spent these days and days going around the community to get that done. Everybody doesn't realize how much work that gets put into some of these projects. Okay.
Were you
finished
gonna
with
make
the
a
gate?
recommendation, John, for the Rocky Road?
Yeah, actually, do we want to make, at the end of Rocky Road, I'm recommending that, and what's the other road on the other side?
Bonita Bill.
Not Benita but the other side of Benita Bill.
Um,
Amarillo or something?
Amarillo.
Amarillo. I recommend that we put the fixed barrier gates at the end where Benita Bill and Rocky Road are, because some of that is just empty land, but the right of way for the district still goes down the middle of that to stop people from tooling around down there and tearing up the land. And then in inexpensive ways between the two fixed gates, you could put a chain with a lock instead of some of these places have the big swinging gates. Or if we all decide we'll do the swinging gate, but I do believe that at some point, all the perimeter road and north and south road should all be standardized, because they're not.
If we were to move forward with that, we would have to make sure that we had room for fire trucks to get through, for fire
Correct.
protection, et cetera. And we should have at least a value placed on that from some means before we approve actually doing it. So if we're going to move forward with that, we need to at least know what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay? So if we can come back with that at the next meeting, we can move forward with something.
And we would also need Bonita Springs permitting
So,
approval.
okay, we're moving on. You ready to go back to the financial report?
So just so I understand, Mr. Chairman, then, that item is being continued?
Correct.
Okay, to next meeting, is that right? So it's just gonna be on the agenda, kind of a standing item, standing item on the agenda? Okay, so, if you,
Move forward with the resolution on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
spend the next month working about the website.
yeah,
Okay,
So-
okay, good enough with me.
so it'll
Good
be,
enough with me. There's only so many hours in a day.
And I work for a living, so.
so pursuing that concept of having action of some sort taken on all these business agenda items, Mr. Chairman, could you entertain a motion to continue this item related to gate report and recommendations to the next meeting?
We'll put a motion on the floor to continue the investigation and recommendation on the gate report to the next board meeting.
I second the motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're ready for Tuscan.
I don't have any other business, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I'm Jeff Tuscan, partner in charge of the audit. This is Lisa McKenzie, who was manager on the audit.
Can you all hear in the back of the room?
No.
There's a volume control right there. You can turn that up a little bit. I'll take care of it if you'd like.
Me?
Yeah, those types of me, go ahead and talk, and we'll just try to make sure that,
Okay. Better?
go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
You're probably gonna have to hold the mic. Yes.
You have two documents in front of you. One's the audit, yours is in a green book. And you also have a set of graphs that we handed out. Couple things before we get into the audit. You're gonna notice, this is our second year doing your audit on this district. And if you compare the audit opinion, which is the page right after the table of contents, to the prior year, you're gonna notice it looks different. This year the standard changed, the format of the audit opinion changed. And so the first paragraph there you see now is called the opinion. It used to be in the back of the whole report. Now it's in the front. And you see that the opinion right there in the center of that first paragraph is unmodified, which means a clean opinion, which is certainly the opinion you want. The other thing that you're going to notice, there was a few new disclosures this year that are required, so the audit report got a little longer. But towards the end of the audit report, it's about 3 pages long now. So if you flip to that second page, there's a whole second section there called Auditor's Responsibility. Basically, these were requirements before, but it didn't have to be written. We could discuss them with you verbally. So before the meeting, I handed a letter to Chris, basically that says what I'm going to tell you now. But essentially, we have to report if there's any disagreements with management, any accounting principles or policies that we didn't agree with, or other significant issues that came up during the audit. And there weren't any of those things. And so the audit, or the letter that Chris is holding there basically says that. But you can see this summarizes our responsibility there. A couple things. I just wanted to highlight those areas. Right past the opinion is a section called Management's Discussion and Analysis. It's right after the opinion. So about 3 pages back, Chair, where I see you're at, about 3 pages deeper in, there's a whole section there called Management's Discussion and Analysis. And so, public, if you're interested in this, it's basically about 7-8 pages long. It compares this year versus last year. It's not allowed to be written in accounting lingo. Has to be just in regular language, and it gives you a nice comparison of this year versus last. And then lastly, if you wanted to make a note, pages 7, although there's almost 40 pages of audit here, basically pages 7 and 9 are the key pages to keep your eye on. Those are the pages that reflect your day-to-day books, and the bottom of page 7 gives you what your fund balance, equity, net worth is at the bottom. And so I'm going to make a comment on that now. In the back of the audit report, it's a whole management letter, but essentially the comments we had last year, they were all resolved except for 2. And one of them said that we recommended that you approve a fixed asset policy. So I'll touch on that as we go through the graphs. But the one I want to point to is at the bottom of this page 7, it shows at the end of September 30, 22, you had $1,037,000 and change dollars left. That's your equity. It's called fund balance. Right at the bottom of page 37. I'm sorry, page 7. And you'll notice there's 3 categories there. Non-spendable, restricted, and unassigned. Well, a comment we had last year, and we are repeating again this year, is there's a 4th category that you're allowed, and it's called assigned. And basically what it is a category of your reserves that the board can approve to set aside or earmark. And this is something that we highly recommend that all districts do. Because if you look at your fund balance right now, you've got $1,023,000 sitting there in what's called unassigned. And the state, after Hurricane Charlie and Wilma came through, recommended strongly that all districts set aside money for an emergency. Well, you just had one go through. And Chris estimated when we were doing the audit, it's probably going to cost the district around $200,000, at least that was the estimate at the time, to recover. And so what the state had recommended back in those earlier years was to talk to your engineer, get them to give you an estimate, and then every year reconfirm that with the engineer and set it aside as a sign. And what that does is it pulls it out of that unassigned category that says, oh wait, we're holding this money for an emergency. If you had staff on board, and you were just talking about bringing somebody else on board, you'd also put a category there for what they call all out. So, and you being a chief probably saw this in the fire district, that basically the state recommended, look, when you look at your district, if you had to bring everybody in full time to help recover from that district, what would it cost in addition to the cost you put up to clean the canals or bring a contractor in? So those are two areas that we recommend for sure that you consider. The third area really isn't an option. Every year in the state of Florida, your fiscal year begins October 1st. And it's getting faster now with computers, but essentially it used to be the tax collector really didn't start putting cash out for about 90 days into your fiscal year. So essentially districts or governments had to live off their reserves from October 1 until the taxes started rolling in. And so the state has always recommended that you put 3 months in reserve in this assigned, because whether you call it assigned or not, you're using those reserves to pay bills and to operate until those next year taxes come in. So that pulls it out, because if you were to decide, let's say, well, we've got all this unassigned money, let's go repave roads and clean canals, and you said, we're going to spend the whole $1 million. Well, what you would find is you couldn't operate this first 3 months of the year because you spent all your reserves on that project. So what this does is it tells the public and the board and staff, look, that money can't be used for anything but to get us started each fiscal year. So you set up basically earmarks. And then there would be a footnote in the audit that breaks that down. Lastly, you guys have spent the majority of this meeting talking about projects. And what we recommend is that you talk to the engineer and start setting aside pools of this unassigned money for future improvements, renovations, repairs to your infrastructure. Because you certainly collected this money and had in mind we're going to use it for that, but your books don't reflect that right now. And so you really should set that aside. In addition to, the Auditor General every year, for the public in case you don't know, these financial statements get sent to the state's Auditor General. And if a management letter is in the audit court 3 years in a row and the government doesn't take action, the Auditor General calls to find out how come you're not listening to the auditor. So it's been in there twice. You don't want to get that comment in there next year. So we recommend you take action on these two items.
So that's emergency operations and the operation between October 1 and December 31.
Yeah, we did that with
But
our
we want
reservations.
Those are the two.
But we want an assigned category with a certain funds.
Right, and then you start setting it aside for the projects that you think
Within the
need.
assigned category.
Yeah,
So you can have as many as you want. The minimum are the two, the emergency and the 90 days.
And we just
you can
recently,
assign all your fund balance.
So these would be subcategories under a general category called assigned.
Right. So on that page, you see non-spendable. And just so you know what that means is, if you look up a little higher in the assets, you already spent $3,108 on prepaid insurance. Well, you can't respend that. So that's why that's in the bottom category. And that was for 23's, fiscal year 23's insurance. Restricted for debt service is part of the debt covenants of your outstanding debt. And then right underneath that is where assigned would go. And you can assign, the board can assign that money, and the only people that can allow that money to be used is the board. So let's say you had that 200,000 sitting there going into Ian. You could have told management, listen, that's the pot of money that we're approving you to spend to clean up,
And make it work.
make it work. In addition, just so you know how the Auditor General's requirements actually go, they have to check with you why you're not responding, but they're required annually to give a report to the legislature in what they call a joint legislative committee, which is an audit committee that basically lists down the districts or the governments that had comments and if they fixed them and or didn't fix them. So you just want to make sure that gets handled before the third year.
And we'll send the resolution. We actually just, at the last board meeting,
We did a resolution.
had a resolution that had, but it was just recently.
Yeah, at least I've sent that to you.
So we'll make sure
But
that you have.
did we actually use the language you said those two specific categories?
Yeah.
We did, okay.
I think, but if you could make sure that we have,
That
what we
language,
have,
so
we can fix that. If we need to amend it, we'll be glad to.
Yeah, we did 90,000 for the interim period, and we did 85,000 for the emergency funds. And then last week I talked about last meeting I talked about making some commitments. If we find that we don't make some of these projects that we plan for, assigning those at the end of the fiscal year to committed dollars for the projects that we were planning. But
And both of those comments that Jeff was talking about had a few other things in there. And so they were kind of like partially resolved, and we made that as a current year addendum that, this was fixed, but this is still needs a little more work, basically.
The other thing, the comments that you had in last year are repeated, but it says underneath, we believe they were resolved. To make sure the Auditor General notes that there was a comment, you resolved it, it's not an issue. Every audit gets reviewed by them.
So actually, this fiscal year before October 1st, we're going to make sure we have all our ducks in line.
Right.
So that when October 1st starts new fiscal year, you're doing an audit next January, you can say your
Right.
accounting practices, their identified line items, et cetera, et cetera. The banking statements show that, whatever. Okay. That's fine.
And it'll be listed in the audit, your items that are assigned, there'll be a footnote in there that breaks it down.
I just didn't
That's what I
remember
said.
this being in last year's audit.
did
And last year's audit was the first one you actually did for us. So this is the second time that you've issued these to us.
Right.
So I didn't recall that being in there last year, at least if it was, we didn't
In fact, one of the
understand.
Well, the other thing was, last year, it was,
A new thing.
pretty far after that's true.
Exactly.
Pretty far after your year end because your other auditor resigned.
Yeah.
Took a while to get things
But in
rolling.
fact, didn't you put some notes in your report about the website?
Yes, there were
Yeah.
several comments last year. Most of them were resolved. Actually, all of them were resolved to some degree, basically,
Yeah.
and there's only two remaining. So there were a lot more that got resolved fully.
The website's a good comment that you brought up because we have to, one of the reports in there you'll notice is called Review of Internal Control and Compliance. Part of the compliance that we have to test is whether you have, there's about 16 or 18 financially related things that have to be on your website. Yours are there, but as she mentioned,
All over the place.
not an easy to find format. But we do test that. And every year the legislature is putting more and more requirements for you to put things on the website. I mean, they were kicking around last year, as Mr. Pringle mentioned, advertising in the newspaper. It came up that they were going to take that out and make you do it on your website, but they decided that didn't pass. They're putting more and more requirements out there.
I think, in fact, one of your comments was about policies and procedures too, correct?
Yeah.
We have those now. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
She got a copy.
All right, if you would, just take a look at those graphs quick, and I'll just make a couple of comments. On that first graph, first page, you see at the top, your cash at the end of the year was up about 71,000 over the prior year. You finished the year cash-wise about 219,000. You see the second row down, you had investments of 837. So essentially, your equity that I mentioned you, $1,037,000, was in cash and it was liquid. So you can go ahead and assign that because you have the cash to fund it. If you roll down that, the biggest change down there after cash was your capital assessment. And basically what that is the receivable, long-term receivable from the landowners to pay down the debt. And that change there, $493,000, is how much you paid down on principal last year. The next page here, liabilities, and you can see there was very little change. It's purely timing in the liabilities. Essentially, everything was paid at the end of the year. The one with the big balance is the current portion of the debt. Basically what it's saying is in 23, fiscal year 23, you're going to pay down $421,000 principal. That's the requirement. In 22, you paid an additional $94,000 more than the requirement. You flip to the third page, you'll see that. You'll see that left over at the end of 22. $409,000, that one will be paid in 24. The $421 on the previous page will be paid in 23. So in theory, at the end of 24, you'll have no debt.
That's the
In
plan.
theory.
That's
On page 4 of the graphs, this is where you see that assigned line show up, and that's where the balance, presuming that you have taken action this year, you'll have a balance there. On page 5, this gives you a breakdown of your revenues.
Can I ask a quick question? You got
So,
assigned, page 4. Assigned, unassigned, so I know assigned is a new category. Non-dispensable, we have that. Restricted for debt service. Would that go from the prepaid insurance to now actually restricted for the receivables and long-term debt? Would that be in that category as well?
no, that balance in that receivable basically offsets your debt. And as it gets paid down, the receivable will go away and the debt will go away. But you definitely don't want to stop collecting on that receivable until the debt's paid down. Just one other comment on page 4 there, that 81,000 at the bottom, and that was your revenue over expenses. So your cash was up about 71,000, and revenue was greater than expenses by about 81.
Chris, is that because we're not expending on certain projects that we thought
No,
this
that-
year?
that
Or
50
just higher tax revenue?
50,000 of that 71,000 we had actually built into the budget to increase the reserves.
Right, and we raised the ticket, yeah, I remember that last year.
Not this year, but that was at the end of 2022.
Right.
There was a $50,000, and that got pushed to Florida Prime.
Okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, Northern Trust.
Northern Prime, okay.
So if you take that 50 out, then that's 21,360, which probably is the 20,000 of the Brooks that we don't really include it because we never know if we're going to get it or not.
On page 5, this gives you a breakdown of your revenues. If you look up there at the second row, you see the phase 1 assessments and kind of piggyback on your comment about the receivable. That shows that you collected $559,000 last year. Of that, you paid $493 for the principal. and then about 50,000 roughly in interest. The other thing I wanted to point out to you is your maintenance tax there. And if you want to make a note, in 22 you were at $4.55 an acre. In 21 you were at $3.21 an acre. You can see that made about $141,000 difference. Now, when the meeting started, Chris mentioned about you could apply for hurricane damage, and basically what they're trying to do is adjust your property value so that when those values are used to bring in next year's taxes, they're taken into account. So places aren't livable. So we're not exactly sure how every district or government around here is going to fare, because there are a lot of unlivable places.
This
throughout the county.
district doesn't hardly fit into that. I don't think we have one house that is unlivable in this district.
Okay.
And
I just want to
we
make
have a
sure,
few
because
blue
there's a lot
tarps.
of governments that are going to get
There's a few
seriously.
blue
Fort
tarps here.
Myers Beach is going to be really hurt.
Sanibel,
March, Bonita
Massachusetts.
Beach, Sanibel. Yeah.
How they're even going to survive, I've been curious where they're going to get money to
Right,
fund.
absolutely.
I mean, you take a fire district, and if their budget's $30 million, there's going to be pretty much zero on the tax coming next September, a year. And we're almost a year
They're going to
out.
have to survive off those reserves. And so that's why the reserves, but many of them don't have that kind of reserve.
That's a mega reserve, which if
Right.
you have $1 million or even $5 million based on their budget size, they would be lucky.
Right, it's going to be tough.
And so.
Mr. Custin, for the benefit of the audience looking at 18, 19, and 20, can you elaborate why those numbers are so much less for phase 1 and phase 2 assessments in 21 and 22? Because that had to do with the way it was accounted for.
Yes. Yeah. When we took over the audit, we determined that they weren't, prior auditor and the prior accounting staff here wasn't recording the collection, including the principal. They were just offsetting it. They were only really showing the interest portion. But shouldn't have been that way, because it was actual collections that came in. In government, you're not allowed to offset, in governmental accounting, you're not allowed to offset expense. Because when a government approves a budget by Florida statute, it's essentially a law. And you can't expend more than that budget. Now, if you took in more revenue, you could amend your budget to increase it. But let's say you had a budget of $1 and you took in $5, you can't spend that $4 difference legally without amending your budget to increase it. Now, a way around that would be, well, we could net the $4 we spent against the $4 revenue, and it looked like you only had $1. But you're not allowed to do that in Florida. You have to record revenue gross, and you have to, the total amount that comes in, and every cent that goes out has to be recorded as an expense. That's why fixed assets are expended, that's why debt is expended. And so the board in Florida is in complete control of the budget and the expenditure. And one of the things we have to test as an auditor is, did you spend more than your budget? And we have to report that if you did, as a management matter, violation of statute, essentially.
So based on what you're saying, are we going to potentially be in violation next year because of this year spending for FEMA?
Well, once you get that FEMA dollar in, amend your budget to take it in as revenue so that you can legally expend it.
What if we don't get it
So
till
we'll
next
amend,
year?
Well, then you take it in next year.
Yeah, because
Okay, I just
the
want to make
amend
sure
the
we
budget.
track
Whenever
that.
it comes
with
in.
FEMA, it could be a year, 2
Right,
years, 3
absolutely.
years
Right.
out before they actually ever fund
Yeah.
this.
Just for your info, when Charlie came through, we had clients that didn't settle for 10 years.
Oh my God.
It took 10 years to close out their claim.
Okay, but as long as we track it, we document it, it's in our notes, it's in our
So we'll-
minutes, so we're fine. As long as we track it, and then you know we're doing that,
Right.
your audit letters are not gonna say 30 in a row, you're in violation of this and something.
Correct.
The one question I would like to ask while we're in this, we have money in our prime account, which was put in there as a reserve for emergencies, I'm correct? That's what we're working off of right now. And as we work forward, we're gonna have to spend more of that money to be able to pay the bills that we're not expecting to get back from FEMA till next year, possibly the year after.
Right,
exactly. So I just wanna make sure we're on track.
Just make
We're
sure
doing the right
that
thing.
if you have to, let's say you did your budget originally last year, who knew Ian was coming, and you didn't budget for, that's 200,000. But make sure that you do increase your budget if you didn't have enough extra in
We
the
do a
budget
budget
to cover
amendment in
this.
September.
Now, if you get to the year end, September 30, and you determine we did spend more, you have 60 days after year end to amend your September 30 budget.
Okay.
So you have 60 days for basically the dust to settle. And if you did, then go back and amend it.
And you'll have to amend your budget also for your carry forward from last year, so
All right.
whenever you choose to do that.
So before year end, Lisa makes a good point. That page I showed you with that fund balance, make sure that you amend your 23 budget to amend the carryover to that audited balance.
Okay.
Because that's another thing that the Auditor General checks. The statute now says any resources that you have available, you have to put in your budget. You don't have to spend it, but you have to show it so
That's
that the
documented.
public knows what you have. It used to be you didn't have to budget that. And the state didn't like the fact that
I do need to
all
ask
your
you a
resources
question though,
weren't disclosed.
before we, do need to ask you a question.
One
before we-
more question while you're on budget issue items. For the first time, this water management district has technically a couple items to be sold, if they sell. But there's governmental auctioning companies that handle that stuff.
Right.
If we put something on there, such as we have our old gates that we took out, we have some old damaged signs that were taken down. They should be, I assume, not thrown in a garbage can, but we should try to retrieve funds from those if we can.
Right.
So we would put those items on an auction site. One of them is called govdeals.com that traditionally all the other government agencies in the area use.
Right.
And that when that money comes in, how is that handled?
If it was a capital asset and it was on the books as an asset, then you put it under, there's a line, I don't know if you know, but the state has a chart of accounts that you're supposed to use.
Mhm.
And the line is called proceeds from disposal of, or disposition of capital asset. So if it was on there as an asset, that's where you put it. And if it's not a capital asset, then you can put it in miscellaneous income. If it's not.
I don't think the signs are a capital asset.
Pardon?
I don't believe the signage is a capital asset.
I doubt it.
They probably weren't,
Yeah.
but they were bought during the road project, weren't they? And so, however it was assigned at the time, which we weren't part of, and matter of fact, nobody here was.
Right.
So we may or may not know how those were handled. How did we handle them?
Well, you've got, we were just discussing that today. Historically, your asset records were not very detailed. You've got a giant amount on your books called infrastructure. And so what that was, we're presuming it was your roads.
That would be
And
true.
And
And,
culverts and ditches.
you've got about $10 million in land improvements and things like that, which presumably was the swales and the canals and things like that. You're not depreciating the 10 million, and you don't have to, because if you're constantly maintaining them, you don't have to.
Okay.
But road-wise, if that $1 million was the road, and you're still responsible for those, that is one of the spots that certainly you might want to put in a sign of how much you're going to put every year into that, or if you're building up for a major project, because as you know, if this was done in '69 or close to that, $1 million in roads is probably 30 million today. That it's going to cost. A lot of districts, 298s, a lot of CDDs are dealing with that now. And that all those roads have reached the end of their life, and paving material and road work and things like that is, not cheap.
It's becoming catastrophic, and it's something that in the years to come will have to be considered at some point. And we don't know what that date is, but it was something that probably should have been considered in the inception of building of the roads, that there had to be something down the road, no different than getting rid of a car after a certain period of time. And it's no different than the maintenance and things on the signs. The district apparently, and if I'm wrong, Chris, please step in, didn't plan for even we had a maintenance program on doing culvert pipes and stuff like that annually. Somehow we got behind a little bit, but then the storms over the past 10 years have added to the debris and the dirt and things that have filled up the ditch systems and the swales to make them a little where they don't perform like they should be doing. The original system was good, but it's these after effect things, and there wasn't a maintenance program put in place to clean the ditches, resod them down the road. And we're just about at that point now. We're hoping that through our request with FEMA, because a lot of it is storm debris, they will step up to the plate and clean our canals out. And because our canals put the ditch system out, which in turn, if they clean that out, they will also clean out all of our culvert pipes in the community. We're hoping that that'll get us back on track for future planning for 10, 15 years down the road from now. So
Something to keep in mind that after the storm, South Florida Water Management's been, which you may or may not have heard, they're looking at putting in new requirements to beef up the maintenance requirements on all these 298 districts. And you were talking about joining ASD. That's one of the things that they've been battling on. We're members of that association. And they've been fighting South Florida because these districts are dealing with what you just said, and now they're talking about beefing it up. And they're talking about all the hyacinth and different things in all these canals. So keep your eye on that one. These guys, your engineers, Mr. Kringle, I know, probably heard about that discussion, but it could be coming there too.
I know your only association is other districts and things that you're involved with. So one of the issues that this district currently is constrained within is that the small community here is paying all the fees for all of the canal system around us, of which the other communities dump into. And right now, one of my main goals is working with the other communities to try to get them to kick in some money to help clean the canals that they fill up all the time. There was just a report done from college out here for FGCU, and that report identified in it that if everything continues on the way that it's going and the neighboring community builds the project they're planning on doing, that during a catastrophic rain event, not even a hurricane, we could see up to 53 homes in this community. And as far as I know, it's never happened before, flood. So that's because the system isn't capable of handling what's going to be thrown at us down the road. And that's why this community needs to start getting a hold of their congressman, and I'm sort of using a political thing here now, but when you sit in these meetings and you hear us talk, this is your community. And if you guys know anybody that can help out, you need to be talking to them.
Okay, so Jim, you mentioned what the prior boards did. Where that $830,000 came from was way back when in 2005, the board started accumulating money to have reserves, to anticipate repairs, and to hopefully build that significantly up as time went on to do the repairs for the roads, so that when we've had comments from residents say, well, you're overcharging me because you didn't need to spend that money. Well, that money was not overcharged. It was deliberately charged and set aside and allocated for, though it was unassigned, for future projects such as the roadways and
But sort
possibly
of
the
what was
drains.
identified as the cost of doing that construction project today is so significantly higher
Yeah.
that we
didn't
somewhere
collect enough.
along the way, we didn't keep adding to it. And because to let a project like that, we could be talking about a couple $1 million and not just $800,000.
Right, we had several years where the maintenance fee was never increased, and had it been increased, then we would have been able to continue
And that's
to
sort
build
of
that
why we
reserve.
added something to it last year to help start
Right.
subsidizing what we need to do. So in the future, everybody would have to come out and be a new plan like we did in financing a project. There's no place else the money comes from except this community, unless we start getting surrounding communities to kick in and pay their fair share of what's going on here.
Well, that's a perfect example for the assignment, because that money came in with the intent that it was put away for these future repairs and replacements, but statements don't show that. And so that's what the assignment category.
Yeah, they were just a
really
general
for.
reserve fund.
Right, that's what the assignment category is really for, so you can alert the public, like, look, this is the reason we're doing it.
And it's not only the canalways, it is also the roadways that you are responsible for.
Oh, I
And
know.
the number of rooftops in the district are significantly increasing, and that increases traffic on the roadways. And so that's an additional cost that has gone
You're
exponential.
referring to the construction
Yes.
going on.
Yes.
Absolutely, we're
Yep. So the use of the improvements is substantially increasing as a result of that additional traffic. So not only are the canalways getting higher and higher usages all the time, but your roadways in the district are receiving substantial increases in their usage as well.
And our construction is major houses and major asphalt on land that used to absorb water.
So it's a substantial from
And
both
that's part of that
directions.
report, if things continue on the way they are, with the exiting water won't, and you and I discussed this earlier about the neighboring neighborhood that has a sufficient amount of dirt has come in from their neighborhood through their bridge system into the blocking the exit canal system from this community. But is it this community's responsibility to have to pay to clean it out? I don't think so. I think that the city of Bonita Springs and the neighboring community should clean that up and pay for it. Hopefully during the FEMA project, it'll get taken care of and we won't have to go there.
So to piggyback on what Jim is saying, our community is limited to so much acreage. We are charged by the acre, so that what we were charged when the houses weren't built versus what we're being charged after the houses are built, we're seeing more wear and tear after the houses are built, which causes our fees to go up because we're not charged based on market value. We have a set limit on what it is. So as the prices increase for the repairs and reserves, our general maintenance fees are going to go up. if that makes sense.
A lot of districts are dealing exactly with that. There's a lot of districts out east that are getting a lot of
Flack.
yeah, but one district flows into the next one, flows into the next one, and a lot of ag land out there is turned into housing. And even some of the counties now are draining or into that canal system. And what used to get flooded cow land is now potentially flooded houses.
Right.
Yeah, one of the issues that I have that concerns me is, just talking to the engineering here, we're getting more, we have 42 properties under construction right now, or near completion. You add up the amount of impervious coverage in the district, and then if this big building project goes across the street, is done by the old golf course, the amount of impervious coverage is forcing water
Right.
to not stay in those areas, but to come where? Here. And we're becoming like a little Dutch boy with his thumb in the dike. At some point, we can't keep holding our thumb in there because the pressure's overwhelming.
Well, the burden shouldn't be placed on this
I agree.
community to pay those bills.
I agree.
If they use the system, they should be required to cough up some money to pay for it. And that's what hasn't happened. And if we go back 30, 40 years ago, this was farmland around us.
Right.
And this community, I believe its inception was 1956. And
69.
if that's correct,
69.
was it 69?
69.
The actual,
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
that's when the judicial decree was adopted that created
the water district?
yes, so the water
Okay.
control district.
Yeah,
was
the
in
company out of
1960.
Georgia was buying up the land in the
Okay.
60s and trying to make this district. Yeah.
I talked to people who had had some homes out here in the earlier years, that's why I thought it was 56. So my apologies for that 69 being good enough.
It was a long time ago.
It was still a long time ago, and we're now burdened with trying to find out whether we have Lee County, the state of Florida, we have all the surrounding communities, the cement plant, the railroad company, all of those are dumping in our system.
Is Baron Collier permitted now to do the golf course property?
I actually think they got the permits.
Because my understanding is you could still go participate in meetings to stop the permitting process.
I don't think so.
I believe they've got their
I
permit.
think it's over.
Yeah. I believe that was, if we still had our chairman here, we could ask them.
City council person.
But that doesn't mean we can impede their ability to do COs if we, as a community, raise enough noise.
But how do we do that? We go to the Benita
We need
Springs
independent
Council meeting?
evaluations by engineering, by the university, by others to say, that's why we don't have the point about impervious coverage. How much impervious coverage is here? How much is gonna be created? And where's that water going?
And then relating all of this back to the presentation of the audit, that is an assigned
Correct.
number, fund balance number to consider, and we can do that in the future with a resolution. We can increase the assignment of fund balance for that purpose. So,
Sorry, we got
yes,
off
sir.
track a little bit.
No, that's fine.
Let's let you get back on.
No, I'm just gonna ask, are there any other questions? All right, then the two things to leave you with are make sure you think about those two policies. The fixed asset and doing the assignment, and then make sure you amend the budget for that fund balance.
Right. Actually, I talked with Richard about that today. He's going to do it next month.
Okay.
And we did give the fund balance assignments resolution to Lisa, so you have that.
Okay.
As well as the policy and procedure manual that included the fixed asset policy, which we're going to take another look at to make sure it includes all the elements you mentioned.
If it doesn't, or if you need it as a separate policy, we can do it in one. But it is included in there, in that
Okay.
big manual.
And one of the things talks about marking our property, and I was wondering
For the
how.
inventory.
It's
Yeah.
supposed to have each inventory, fixed asset inventory item is supposed to have a tag.
A tag on
It
it.
has, an identifying number and that sort of thing, but
So-
your list per se is it's so grouped up that, you
Gonna be hard to
basically
do.
have to kind of recreate.
Well, we can do that for the gate, obviously.
Sure, yeah, you can do that. They're usually like a metal
Yeah,
tag. that's
and then they
permanently
just kind of
affixed.
glued, yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
And Chris, did you have other questions for me? 'Cause I'm gonna
Well,
speak, but-
I wanted to know about how I show those assignments because you didn't want me breaking up account balances. So what I did on the combined bank statements this time was I footnoted 1, 2, and 3, which
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 talked about this assignment, that assignment, and this is
Yeah.
reserved for that particular account.
Right.
But on QuickBooks, how do I show it?
Okay, you can do that if you want to do it in the fund balance section, in the equity section, and you can create additional accounts in there, that's fine. It's just when it comes to cash, when you have a bunch of different accounts, that gets reconciled, and you're like, which accounts do I take
Yeah.
to group
So
up
maybe
different bank
we can
accounts?
talk about that.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll do that later.
If you're talking about marking those assets, on page 36, we list a section that tells you the state requirement on how to mark them. That section 69I. So if you look that up in 274, it tells you exactly how to mark them and what needs to be on the tag.
And would that include like all the road signs and everything?
If they're not
If
on
they're
the
capitalized.
They're not
If
capitalized.
they're not capitalized, listed on your fixed asset, and I'm assuming in your policy, you probably said $1,000 or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So less than $1,000,
Yeah.
you don't
Each
have
sign is.
to. Other than that, you can put your, if you want, you don't have to, but you can put your initials on them. Lee County just put LC on their street signs, just so they know they're required to maintain, but you don't have to.
Okay.
If it's less than $1,000, if you picked $1,000, whatever limit you came up with. You don't
So I
have
do that for the for the guardrail and the gate.
Yeah.
And that's essential. I mean,
Do you take the
would I do
labor-
that for the weirs and all of that, the concrete
How
weirs?
can you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to.
You don't add the
Clarify.
labor cost to the cost of the sign as part of the asset? No, okay,
Just the material costs.
okay, just wanted to make sure of that.
All right. No, I did pick up on that.
Okay,
Any other questions?
we're good.
No,
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the information and your guidance.
Thank you for being very thorough with us.
We do have a very small handful number of bound audit statements. Should anybody in the audience request one or want one, I only have a handful, but I can give it to you if you want tonight,
Are you
or
gonna post that on the website?
it will be posted on the website after I unbind it and.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, the audit presentation has been made. The audit report is before you. It would be appropriate at this time for the board to take action by motion to approve the audit as presented.
Okay,
Make a motion to approve the audit as presented.
Second?
aye, motion carries. Okay, we're down to public input. We have a 3-minute limit on that. Is there anybody who has anything they'd like to say? No public input, thank you very much. Supervisors' comments. That's the period. No supervisors' comments tonight, we're looking good here. Only
can't
one
believe we
thing
don't
left
have
on the agenda, that's to adjourn. Thank you all for coming tonight.
We have to have a motion to adjourn.
Just try to remember, if you can help out in any way.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Aye, motion carries.
All right, who, Jim, John?
Here, you're all here. You have to sign.